You asked about a shooting that we just had in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was an act of domestic terrorism.
Tonight, new clashes between anti-ICE demonstrators and federal law enforcement in Minneapolis.
And so in speaking with several people who currently live there and work there.
This is also a community on edge. There are roughly 80,000 Somalis living here in the area.
Minneapolis was still asleep when the cold wind crawled across Portland Avenue South. Frost clung to the Victorian rooftops, and the neighborhood looked peaceful, untouched, unaware, unprepared. But beneath that silence, something darker was approaching. At 4:47 a.m., a convoy of unmarked black SUVs rolled slowly through the frozen streets. Their headlights were off, their engines barely humming, their tires crunching softly over the snow. Inside those vehicles sat more than 250 federal agents, a joint strike force of FBI, ICE, and DHS, geared for combat, not patrol. This wasn't a routine warrant. This was a takedown. The target was a stately home with manicured hedges, the residence of Judge Hassan Duale, a respected public figure. To the community, he was a symbol of justice. To federal intelligence, he was the center of a web so intricate it had taken years to map. At exactly 4:52 a.m., the command was given. Boom! The front door exploded under the force of flashbangs. Agents stormed in, shouting commands, sweeping corners, breaking through defenses. But instead of a startled homeowner, they were met with 21 armed guards, trained, organized, and ready to kill. For 10 intense minutes, the air inside that house shook with gunfire, shouts, and detonations. The peaceful Minneapolis neighborhood woke up to chaos, unaware that this raid was only the first layer of a massive network about to be exposed.
Now, New York Times is reporting 6, but we know about at least 3 initially that stepped down. This news came out today, and they did this. They resigned from their positions entirely, not just the investigation.
The story didn't begin at the mansion. It began with what looked like a simple traffic stop. Just 24 hours earlier, a patrol officer pulled over a small SUV on a residential road. The driver, a 37-year-old woman named Renee Good, immediately began shouting about her rights. A crowd gathered. Phones recorded everything. Within minutes, the video hit social media, labeled as another case of government overreach. But the cameras didn't show what officers found in the trunk. Once the vehicle was searched, the officers uncovered 80 kilograms of high-purity meth and over $2.3 million in sealed cash. The woman wasn't a victim. She was a courier. Under pressure, she refused to talk, but her phone did. GPS logs revealed her deliveries matched a strange pattern. Her drop-offs occurred on the exact dates Judge Duale presided over major narcotics cases. The investigation escalated instantly. Financial forensics exposed something impossible to ignore. More than $417 million had passed through hidden accounts connected to the judge. Transfers were routed through Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia. Every major deposit followed a courtroom ruling that benefited cartel-linked defendants. Judge Duale didn't just turn a blind eye, he engineered the system. Agents realized Minneapolis wasn't dealing with street-level crime. They were dealing with a super facilitator, a man using the justice system as a protective shield for a continental drug pipeline. The raid on his home was no longer optional, it was urgent.
They've seen a lot of this, a lot of the confrontation, but they do say that it's isolated to certain parts of the city, specifically.
When the gunfire stopped, agents began sweeping the judge's home and immediately felt something was wrong. The residence didn't look like a house, it looked like a command center. Behind a false wall in a guest bedroom, they found 900 kilograms of narcotics. In the basement, metal crates held 1.4 tons of heroin and synthetic opioids. Every hallway had surveillance feeds and encrypted comms panels. But the biggest secret lay outside. Hours earlier, FBI drones had detected unusual heat plumes behind the detached garage, far stronger than any household system should produce. When agents cleared the snow and activated a hidden hydraulic lift, the ground split open to reveal a reinforced tunnel, industrial, engineered, and massive. Inside the underground corridor were conveyor belts, ventilation systems, and storage vaults large enough to house entire shipments. This wasn't an escape tunnel. It was an underground logistics hub. When the full search concluded, agents seized $74 million in cash, stacked in suitcases, safes, and even inside walls. It was enough to destabilize a small country's economy. But the most disturbing discovery wasn't the money or the drugs. It was the judge's encrypted network. 5 computers still warm, still online, and still connected to a live system tracking incoming cargo. And every line of data pointed to one location, the Minneapolis port. The mansion was only the brain. The real body of the beast was waiting at the docks.
City and state lawmakers are going to demand that the FBI cooperate with Minnesota's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension on this investigation.
At 6:22 a.m., a thick fog rolled over the Minneapolis port as dock workers prepared for another routine shift. They had no idea the largest federal strike in state history was minutes away. Then, without warning, the convoy appeared. Black SUVs tearing through the mist, smashing through security barriers. More than 200 federal agents deployed in 3 tactical waves. Resistance was immediate. Armed guards hidden among shipping containers opened fire. Bullets ricocheted off steel hulls, sparking against cranes and machinery. Federal teams advanced under cover, neutralizing threats with precision. The real target was Warehouse C, identified in the judge's encrypted files. When agents forced the doors open, the truth hit them like a shockwave. Behind pallets of frozen produce were stacked crates of narcotics, row after row, 1.1 tons of heroin, 800 kilograms of fentanyl, barrels of synthetic compounds, packaging lines ready for national distribution. This wasn't a shipment. It was the Midwest Distribution Nerve Center. Meanwhile, investigators in the port offices uncovered the identities of 12 port officials who had spent years manipulating customs clearances. Each one had been receiving massive payments through the same shell companies tied to Judge Duale. As the operation unfolded, a tugboat attempted to flee, engines roaring, crew scrambling. Federal interceptor boats boxed it in. On board, they found 420 kilograms of narcotics strapped to pallets, ready to be dumped into the lake. By noon,
So ICE is present there to conduct ICE operations to round up illegal aliens within the state and within the country. And in this particular case, they were there conducting such operations.
By afternoon, Minneapolis was in shock. The beloved judge was in custody. 12 port officials were facing indictments. 21 armed guards had been captured alive. But the investigation wasn't about the arrests. It was about what the case revealed. For nearly a decade, the city had been infiltrated from within. The justice system, the Port Authority, and several municipal offices had been quietly compromised. What looked like incompetence or delayed procedures were actually calculated decisions made to protect a billion-dollar narcotics pipeline. The drugs seized that day, nearly 5.5 tons, were enough to supply millions of lethal doses across the Midwest. The betrayal was enormous. A judge sworn to uphold the law had weaponized it. Officials trusted with protecting the ports had sold access to criminals. Workers believed to be public servants were acting as cartel assets.
A lot of agents in the metro today, and Operation Metro Surge had some people cheering their efforts. Other people, though, like Governor Tim Walz, were angry that it was happening at all.
Minneapolis learned a painful truth. The most dangerous criminals don't always lurk in alleys. Sometimes they sit behind desks, wearing suits and shaking hands. As Judge Duale awaits trial, he faces multiple life sentences on charges of racketeering, narcotics trafficking, and corruption. The FBI states the operation is far from over. More arrests are coming, more officials will fall, and more connections will be exposed. For now, the city begins the long process of rebuilding trust. And for the rest of America, this case stands as a warning. Corruption doesn't hide in shadows. It hides in plain sight until someone turns on the light.